Good morning, everyone. During my last speech, I spoke to you guys about police brutality and about some facts that lead to the increasing issue. Well, today I'm going to speak to you guys about how the use of police force to restrain individuals is wrong and some form of action should be taken to stop this issue from growing. So I'll begin by showing you guys this picture. I know it's very poor quality. Sorry, they were both taken by like parking lot cameras. In this picture, I don't know if you guys can see, but there are 1, 2, 3, 4 officers and 1 person on the ground. And as you can see, it's kind of circled around his head. Well, basically, 4 officers here were trying to restrain a suspect, and while they were restraining him, the suspect kept yelling out, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." So by the time they were done restraining him, the guy actually died. And below in this picture, you can't really see, but there's 2 officers right here and a man on his knees on the ground, and he was being restrained for protesting. While at the same time, there were batons, as you can see, sort of see here. There were batons being pulled to his back. One other example is there's a state in the South, in Birmingham, Alabama. A car theft suspect was restrained by not 1 but several officers. According to an anonymous source who released a video of it on YouTube, the anonymous source went by JVPNW. I guess they didn't want to let the public know who it was because it's such a racy / I guess hot topic during the society. So the suspect was restrained by several officers after he was, I guess, seen trying to rob the inside of a car. So when he realized that there was undercover officers around the area, he immediately stepped out of the vehicle and, put his hands on behind his head and waited to be taken into custody. But the use of force that the several officers used was unnecessary. So, which leads me to my next point. Authors Joffrey Alpert and Roger Dunham wrote a book that is related to the use of police brutality, and it's not only aimed towards the suspects and victims, but it's also aimed towards police officers themselves. They state that in 23% of cases, officers use batons, dogs, intermediate weapons, firearms, and other means to restrain subjects. What this tells us is that we are living in the 21st century. Such means to restrain suspects should not be used, which in turn kind of take us back decades ago when people were fighting during the civil rights movement, and while they were fighting for their rights, batons, dogs, and even water hoses were used to kind of oppress them, which also leads us all the way hundreds of years ago back to time in slavery, when slaves who were trying to fight for their freedom were also being oppressed, and they were being restrained with either chains, shackles, and they were just being kept away from everyone in society. So instead of I guess, the police officers and the law enforcement moving us forward into a safer society, they're sort of taking us back into times of when people were being oppressed and they were being treated wrong. So one person, of course, well, most of us need to take charge of this, and we need to do action. So with such means being used to restrain suspects with such means that are being used to restrain suspects, some form of action must be taken. According to a report by Channel 9 Eyewitness News, they reported that 1 congressman has already suggested ideas and forms of actions that should be taken in order to lower the police use of force against suspects. So the congressman suggested that officers be retrained, re-educated, and that new systems to report abuse by victims be established in order to make the system work better with both victims and suspects to make it, a safer community and safer neighborhoods. So when he suggests this, I guess what we should all take out of it is that at some point or another, we all need to take action, and that we should all be aware that these are things that are happening. It's not something that we just see on the news because maybe they're highly publicized. But I guess if we take the time to look at everything else that we see, for example, these are things that are happening in our society. It's not just a once in a week thing that when we watch the news we see, oh, a police officer has assaulted so-and-so, but if we were to take the time out of our day to, I guess, go onto YouTube or read the news or, I guess, take a look into smaller communities or smaller newspapers, we would be able to realize that this issue is a problem, that it is growing, that it's not just a once in a month thing or something that doesn't happen so much, but that it is reoccurring and that it is growing. As I've said in my last speech, there have been laws passed from way before now, like dating back to the 13th century, that do tell us that at that point in time there were laws trying to be passed and trying to be implemented so that both officers and civilians / suspects were kept safe. So I guess now that you've heard why it is important to take action upon this growing issue, I urge everyone to take interest upon the issue and its implications on the public. Like I said, although we are just, I guess, college students, at the same time, we are also a growing, like, outgoing and outspoken community. Like, we can all make a change. Not just with police brutality, but for any other, I guess, right or human violations that are occurring around the world. We could all take part of it and make a difference. So I guess, thanks for listening, everyone, and remember that, like I said, we can all make a difference to change the world, no matter how small we are.